Hi, this is Wayne Zell, and welcome to Blueprint for Wealth, your fast-paced video cast that's designed to help you realize your personal dreams of wealth and freedom. Brought to you by Zell Law and Aspire to Exit. We're out here to present you with special guests and special topics that are of interest, particularly to the entrepreneurs of you out there. And today, my special guest joining me today is Doug Thorp. Welcome, Doug. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Wayne. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. We've had a chance to chat a couple of times before, and I've learned a lot about you, and I'm hoping that the listeners are going to learn a lot about you today. We'll start off with a little bit of background. I know that you are a Texas resident, a Texas-grown, San Antonio born, or at least
Correct.
Raised there. Tell us a little bit about your background before 2008 when things changed.
Oh, my. Well, the quick story is you are right. I'm native Texan, born and bred. Grew up in San Antonio, but went to school at Texas A&M. And being a byproduct of the environment in San Antonio, when I was a young lad, we had 5 military bases.
Wow.
You couldn't swing a proverbial dead cat without hitting somebody in the military. So it was a big influence in my life. I thought that was going to be my career, so I aspired to go the military route. Small tidbit that everybody looks at me oddly when I say this. I was actually appointed to West Point and turned it down in favor of taking a scholarship and going to Texas A&M.
Why is that? Why would you do that?
I had a desire. I had an older cousin who was an Aggie, and I was 6 years old when I saw his Aggie boots for the first time. And I said, I want to be one of those guys. I want to own some of those boots. And it just became a focal point of mine. And when my letter to West Point came, I sat there and my mother said, "What's wrong? You should be very excited." I said, "No, this letter means I'm not going to A&M. And she said, "Well, then don't go." So that's what we did.
She was an influence in your life. I read that she was an entrepreneur, and that's what got you into being an entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Very much so. I was raised the only child of a hardworking single mom. And while I was still in elementary school, she bit the bullet, resigned from her day job, and went out and started a business. So it was just the two of us, and she took the plunge. She was an interior designer by trade and started a design firm that actually did quite nicely, and it gave her more of the freedom that she wanted and the independence. It wasn't an easy road by any means because being a female, she was often on construction job sites, and I can remember walking construction jobs as a young lad, and she held her own. She knew how to work with those guys and get their attention and get them to do the things she wanted them to do for the build of the project.
So it got you into the entrepreneurial spirit, but then you decided to go to Texas A&M and join the Corps of Cadets, which is not very entrepreneurial, is it?
No, it's not. But again, at the time, I was still thinking more about military as a career. She was encouraging me. She said, "Wow, you could do 20 years and earn a nice retirement, and then you'd be plenty young to still go start a business and do something." And that made sense. So that was the path I struck out on. I was awarded an Army scholarship, and that put me in the Corps. And but it was a proverbial full ride of sorts. But it created a commitment. When I graduated, I was commissioned in the Army, and I had to serve some time to pay that back, which I was happy to do.
My daughter's doing that now. She's going to be a chaplain in the Navy at the end of her ordination year this year. So I'm very proud of her and hope she makes it through okay. And thank you for your service.
Appreciate it.
How did that influence you being in the Corps of Cadets in terms of being an entrepreneur, being a leader in the community?
Well, the Corps has a tradition, and it still exists to this day, of building leaders. That's the stated primary purpose. And whether it's people that go into the military as a career or simply exit school, graduate, and move on to civilian life, the whole idea of developing leaders, and one of the wisest things I ever learned early on in my experience there, I had a mentor that I had quickly gravitated toward on campus my freshman year. He made it clear to me, he said, Doug, your freshman year is going to be tough. It's going to be hard, but keep in mind, there's one purpose. If you're ever going to be a leader, you got to know how to be a follower.
Interesting.
So we are going to teach you your freshman year how to be a follower, and then from there on, you can define the leader you want to be.
Were there any other mentors there that really helped you define yourself as a leader?
Oh, totally. My second year at A&M, I got involved in the Memorial Student Center, and that was a lot of extracurricular activity. And I quickly met some of the staff advisors that were working there supporting the student organizations. There were two gentlemen in particular. There was a gentleman, Colonel Hal Gaines. He was a retired Army colonel that was one of the administrators. And the director of the whole center was a gentleman named Wayne Stark. And he's actually a bit of a legend in Aggie land. Both are now deceased, but Wayne was a tremendous influence in my life. And I don't think a day went by that I didn't drop in either one of their offices for a chat and some word of wisdom from those guys.
What were the things that you learned from them that really influenced you throughout your life and what you're still doing today as an executive coach?
I've chuckled. There was one bit of wisdom from Colonel Gaines. What he told me, don't ever apologize
for anything.
And it's funny that line has now been made famous in the TV series NCIS with the seminal character that Mark Harmon plays, Leroy Jethro Gibbs. He has these rules of law. And one of his rules is don't ever apologize.
I'd be in a lot of trouble if I weren't able to apologize to people for some of the things I've done. But in any event, so you were involved with the town hall there at A&M, right?
Right.
That sounded kind of cool because you were dealing with Elton John and some of these other.
It really was. It was a great opportunity. And it was a student programming organization, and we brought big name entertainment to the campus. And my senior year, I was able to work my way to be chairman of that organization or head of it. And I was very proud. In 52 weeks, if you plot it out, now these are straddled because of school year, but if you start the clock and do 52 weeks, we did 38 shows.
Whoa.
And they ranged everything from big name rock and roll entertainers. You mentioned Elton John. We had Chicago. We had the Eagles. We had Sonny and Cher, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. These
are names that you and I would know, but not all the
listeners. They're not. They've kind of lost their edge now. But but we also included some classical quartets and Broadway shows and some other things that came out of it.
That's a passion of mine. So I would have loved to have been involved in something like that in my undergraduate days.
Yeah, I've often wondered why I didn't become a concert promoter. That would have been a thing that I could have really enjoyed.
You could have been good at it too. You knew the whole industry by the time you graduated college. So you got out, you went into the Army, you became a second lieutenant, and there they gave you a whole lot of responsibility managing property. Tell us about that. What was your gig in the Army?
Yeah, what I tell people is one of the interesting things, and this is true in all the military services, if you're a commissioned officer, you're going to be given an opportunity for a big scope early on as a young officer, whether it's headcount, personnel, or equipment and resources. I was given a property book that had at the time, and this is in the 70s, so I'm dating myself, but it had about a $10 million book value. And I don't know in today's dollars what that would be, maybe 40, 50 million, something like that.
Sure.
But yeah, it was all mine, and I had to account for every little dime of it and work the process. So it was a heavy load of responsibility. But the military is not afraid to give young managers, young officers that kind of responsibility to
An
get the job
opportunity
done.
too.
It's an opportunity.
You must have learned a lot doing that.
Totally.
You went to grad school while you were in the military?
Correct. Yeah.
Tell us about that. What did you study?
Troy University had a remote campus on our base in Alabama. I was at Fort Rucker, the Army Flight School, and I had the opportunity to enroll. I've got something like 12 hours from the University of Southern Cal mixed into my graduate transcript.
Wow.
They had a satellite campus on our base. Mm-hmm. But their program was not going to award me an MBA, and that's the goal I was shooting for. So I transferred those hours to Troy and finished with an MBA.
Did the MBA help you get a job when you decided to leave the Army? You were a captain when you left the Army, right?
Correct. It definitely did. I did what a lot of young people do when they're making a transition like that. I reached out to my network of friends and associates, and I had a college friend who had gone to work for a large regional bank in Houston. It was called Texas Commerce at the time. She had risen up the ranks. She had already been serving there about 5 years and had had her own progression of success. She told me, yeah, we need guys like you. And when I did my first round of interviews, there were 3 senior officers of that bank that were ex-military that said, we'll hire you today. Can you start tomorrow? And 2 of those 3 coincidentally had served at Fort Rucker. So we had a lot of commonality there of experience to talk about.
Do you have any highlights of your 20 years as a banker?
Oh, goodness. We went through so many things. The thing I think I'm most proud of, I will speak corporately, our organization had an amazing leadership team that as a young person, I just assumed all banks operated the way we did. And it was only many years later that I discovered that wasn't true at all. We were that top probably 2% of operating efficiency and effectiveness. Our bank, in the 20 years I was there, we ran off 64 consecutive quarters of earnings growth.
That's unheard of.
16 years of positive trajectory. We were darlings of Wall Street. And we went through, and keep in mind, this was when the Carter administration helped our prime rate climb to 21%.
Right. I remember that very clearly.
I just chuckled to myself today. People are agonizing over 7% interest rates. Oh my God, the world's coming to an end. It's like, yeah, try 21.
When I graduated college and I went to work for the first time, it was right at that time. And I'll never forget it. My money market was paying me 19% per year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So,
that was the good news.
I hope we never see those days again. They say that we won't because of the new things that we have in place at the Fed and the Federal Reserve. But, you never know. And we just keep your eyes open and your money in your mattress or whatever. So,
well, but the thing, if I may, the thing that really resonated with me in the way we achieved those earnings results, we had an amazing discipline about budget and planning. And it was it was a near religious experience to go through our annual budgeting process. I watched it come together. I spent some time on the budget and planning team early in my days and learned the process top to bottom. And it became a hard and fast roadmap that we operated by month over month. There was a scorebook that came around at the end of every month. Every department, every cost center was analyzed for whether or not you're tracking on budget. And we had weekly officer meetings where if your box in the monthly chart turned out the wrong color, you got called out in that officer meeting.
That's good management. That's good fiscal management. And for a bank to do that, that's absolutely critical. And you're right. During that time frame, it was rather precarious. Later on, obviously, it got even worse with the S&L crisis. But I think to learn that kind of discipline as a business person and then to apply it after your banking career in startups, I'll bet that helped a lot. Tell us about your career in working with startups. So it was another 20 years worth of effort.
Yeah, initially when I chose to leave the bank, our bank went through two very large mergers, the last of which was Chase, and we ultimately became Chase Bank of Texas. But that was by virtue of what had been known as Chemical Bank was our parent company, and they bought Chase and retained the brand.
I remember that.
And then subsequent, even after I left, of course, Bank One came in and bought Chase and retained the brand. And that's how Jamie Dimon became chairman of Chase. But going through those two mergers, I hit a 20-year mark and I was offered an early retirement. We were having an attrition right-sizing exercise and
a reorganization.
Post-merger, and they gave me a nice offer, and I kind of did the Jerry Maguire thing and said, "Show me the money," and I was out the door. And happy to do so. I had seen some things that were changing in the banking community in general, and it wasn't just organizationally. It's not a knock but it was just trends both from a regulator standpoint and otherwise. I could foresee it wasn't going to be banking the way I knew banking, so I really didn't want to do that anymore. So took the retirement and did what all good bankers do. I started a consulting business and started advising clients on various things, mostly operational and technology. But I quickly discovered that my clients really were hungry more for counsel. They got to know me.
What were they looking for from you?
Well, I describe it this way. We would get started on a project. We'd be 2 or 3 weeks into a project, and then I would get them waving their finger at me. Can you come in my office and shut the door? I got something I want to talk about. It's unrelated to our project. I've just got a thought. You seem like somebody I could talk to. I've got some ideas. What do you think? And I quickly had learned the wise old advice of asking the question. Once I heard what they had, I asked for permission to give them feedback. Well, I hear what you're saying. Would you like some feedback? May I offer a suggestion? And asking for permission to do that. And 100% of the time, the answer was, yeah. That's why I asked you in here.
That's why they asked you in there in the first place.
What you got?
But the way you handle that was very professional. I like that. May I offer a suggestion? Would you like some feedback on that?
Yeah.
As opposed to just letting them vent.
It's a foundational tenet of executive coaching is to create that rapport and the ability to have that permission to do the work. Even though it's implied you're going to be working, that's not necessarily granted at the psycho-emotional level. So bridging in by asking the permission is what makes it become more effective. But anyway, this went on for many years, and I started saying to myself, gee, I think there's something in this coaching thing. But I kind of parked that. I was still in the entrepreneurial mode, and through several iterations of different things, I had started my own company in 2003. It was a services company that was related heavily to the mortgage banking industry. It was an outsourced business platform. We were processing loan files and doing a lot of document imaging technology. We were kind of a leader at the time on being able to streamline the secondary market process. And everything was going great. The company had taken off. I had gotten up to about 35 employees, had about 200 institutions across the country that relied on us for work. And then the crash of '08 happened.
Yeah. Yep.
And to make a very long story short, in 45 days, my 200 customers lost collectively 75% of their business.
Oh my gosh.
And that meant, guess who lost 75% of his business?
Sure.
And
how did you react? How did you adapt to that devastating event?
Well, it was a, giant torpedo in the side of the boat, to say the least. And I finally, we tried to rock along for a couple of days. Well, the first thing I did, I made phone calls to every one of the CEOs of those 200 institutions. I said, what do you see? What are you going to do? And the news was not good from any of them. There was no one that had a good news story to relay. So my next call was to my 4 primary investors. I said, gentlemen, I'm not going to write any more checks for this business. I'm not going to ask you to. And I told them the story about talking to the 200 CEOs, and they said, we get it. We're with you. We vote yes for the unwinding clause in our operating agreement. Sure. Execute the unwinding and go ahead.
What a shame.
So we did the orderly unwinding of the business. And
what did you learn from that experience? What are the positives that you took away?
Well, the big positive was being straightforward and being somewhat transparent with customers and certainly with my investors. Just never hiding behind the truth or the reality of what's going on.
Right.
There was no real silver lining in that story at the end.
But you emerged from it and you're succeeding today. Tell me what you're doing today. After all these years, I know that you've got Owner-HeadwayExec, which is a coaching company, and we'll talk about a few other things. And you've also written a book called Strive for Job Search Success. You've written several books, but that one caught my eye. Tell me first a little bit about that book and what you're trying to get at in that book.
Yeah, so where the Strive book came from, my immediate reaction to the crash of '08 was, I was a company owner, entrepreneur with no future. I didn't have a plan B. And I facetiously told my wife, and she teases me about this to this day. I told her, I said, I'm a smart guy. I'll find something to do in 2 or 3 months. It'll be fine. Well, the crash of '08, unemployment went up to double digits in most markets. People with heavy, high-priced, white-collar jobs were some of the biggest segments of the market that got put out on the street. Yep. And I found myself attending some local area networking events to try to, work through that process of finding another job. There was an area church who had an amazing program that was teaching job search success. I went to their program, but the summer I started going there, number one, they happened to be a 45-mile one-way trip for me from my house door to door. And that summer with the crash, the price of gas was about $4.50 a gallon.
That's right.
And I said, 90-mile round trip once a week at $4.50 a gallon, and I don't have a job. I'm not going to do that. So my entrepreneurial juices kicked in, and I asked the leader of that organization, I said, can you franchise? Can I take your model and go deliver it down in my geography? And he said, being a church, my answer is no, but go with our blessing. If you can pull it off, go do it. And no harm, no foul. So I got some colleagues together and we created a new nonprofit that we named Jobs Ministry Southwest. We were in the southwest part of the Houston geography. And we got a church to sponsor us for location and meeting place. And we started running our own weekly programs, teaching and coaching people. But one of the biggest things I quickly learned in that exercise was that the loss of a job wasn't just a data point in somebody's journey. It was an impact to their psyche, their sense of being. And so we got to analyzing things that were going on, and I created a 6-step job search process that happened to be the acronym STRIVE.
Awesome.
And the very first step in the STRIVE model is to do a personal survey of reconnecting with who and what you are, what you believe in, and where you think you want to go.
Excellent.
And I encourage people to forget what you've done before, but think about what you really believe in and what you want to do, and orient everything else to that end.
And so the 6-step process, do you still apply that today in advising executives and coaching them?
I do. Often my executive clients want to talk about career transition or career projection, and I introduce them to this STRIVE principle and get them looking toward how they can rethink their next step and the choices they want to make.
Tell us about your executive coaching today. What are your ideal clients? Who do you coach? How do you coach them? And what are the benefits of coming to Doug Thorp?
Well, great question, Wayne. And like many things entrepreneurial, I have seen it evolve a bit. I've had the privilege over the last 12 years to coach many different people. When you look at my website, I drop some names about some of the bigger Fortune 500 brands I've had a chance to work with. I worked with executives from ExxonMobil, Coca-Cola, UPS, Mizuho Bank, Regions Bank, and the list goes on and on and on. I've probably coached about 300, maybe 400 executives at this point in all of those kinds of institutions. But I find myself going back to my roots in the entrepreneurial world. And there was kind of a burning hunger and a need to want to go back there. So I started taking on entrepreneurs who needed help with their business. And I found an opportunity to kind of leverage my banking experience with the coaching and put a package together that was an odd blend. It's kind of like when you go to the yogurt bar and you mix your chocolate and vanilla together, it comes out. That's kind of what I'm doing between business advisory and the executive coaching offering now. And I'm doing that for entrepreneurial enterprises, and I still do the corporate work from time to time, but I'm spending a lot of my attention in that entrepreneur space.
Isn't it more fun? It can be challenging, but to me, it's
yes.
exciting.
I mean, my quick answer is yes. And I say that in all respect to my corporate guys. I don't want to alienate them by any means, but
no.
But they're yes. And because of my own upbringing and experience, the entrepreneurial world is a much more interesting place for me.
It's more, you're using more of your skill set.
Yeah.
Is the way I would put it, as opposed to saying it's more fun. So for those of you who are corporate executives listening and want to hire Doug, don't listen to me. Listen to him. The other thing I want to talk about before we part ways today is a new venture that you've gotten involved with. But before we do that, I did notice on your website you have something called Discover Your Why and Why.os. What is Why.os?
Well, a quick, interesting story. There's a gentleman, Dr. Gary Sanchez. He's a dentist by trade. Several years ago, he was introduced to Simon Sinek's famous TED Talk on Start With Why. Well, Gary was at a station in his life that he had that gnawing sense there was more, and he didn't know how to figure out more. Wasn't sure what that meant. But he had already launched on the quest to determine that. The quick story is he stalked Simon Sinek for about a year trying to get an audience with him, and Simon conveniently eluded him most of the way, but finally got worn out and took the call and said, "Why are you calling me? What do you need to know?
What do you want?"
And at the time, Gary's question to Simon was, okay, I like your stuff. How do you determine your why? How do you know? And Simon's answer was, I don't have a way to do that. I just know you need to do it. So Gary embarked on his own journey to discover how to discover why. He embarked on a manual survey of 40,000 associates in the dental community. And took him obviously several years to do it, but he created this list of questions that kept getting refined over time. Okay. And the very long story short, he discovered in all of humanity, there's only 9 whys. There are really only 9 answers to that question. What is your why?
Okay.
And he subsequently determined that following Simon's outline, because remember, Simon's outline says why, how, and what. Most companies start with what we do, but they don't explain how or why they do it. Simon's argument is go the other way. Start with why, figure out the how, and then you'll know the what. Well, in this assessment process, Gary quickly realized that as you stack these 9 whys, your very first one that you score at the top of the list is your why, personally. The next one is your how, and the third one is your what.
Interesting.
And it's combinations of the 9 and whatever the permutation is of 9 by 3, and I don't know what that number is. I don't remember, but anyway, Gary now has automated the surveying process. And so for an individual that is curious to know their why, and by the way, Gary has named it and branded it the Why Operating System. Mm-hmm. Like all good computers have an operating system, we as individuals have a fundamental operating system. And to give you the quick example, my why, how, and what is I look for a better way. Everything I do has something to do with looking for a better way. That's my why. My how is by then mastering the topic. If I think I've found a better way, I'm going to exhaust myself figuring out what that better way really means, how it can work, what are all the resources on it. Yes. And then thirdly, my what do I do in the world is contribute. I'm wired to go out in the world and take all of that and share it with others.
You know, I resonate with that. I'm going to have to subscribe to the y.os on your website. And I did see that. That's on dougthorpe.com. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's worth it for everyone, regardless of our age or our station in life, to really pinpoint our why, our how, and our what in that order, according to Simon Sinek. Last thing I wanted to mention to the listeners and talk about just for a couple minutes was your new association with a group called Acquira. What do they do, and what's your involvement with them?
Acquira is a company that has been around actually for a couple of years. What they are doing is redefining and pretty well disrupting the business broker game. And while Acquira doesn't consider itself a business broker per se in the traditional sense of the word, we have created an ecosystem for buyers and sellers of businesses to come together. And primarily for us, we're on the buyer side, helping support that journey. So our typical client is the aspiring entrepreneur who wants to become an entrepreneur by acquisition, not by startup. And so they take their wealth and earnings and bring it to the purchase of a business. And by the way, folks, if you haven't already heard it right now, there's something called the silver tsunami happening. Baby boomers are exiting their businesses in droves, and there is $6 to $7 trillion of worth in the marketplace right now that is subject to transfer.
Small businesses will transition in the next 10 to 15 years. 80%.
Right. So it is a major economic phenomenon, and it is an ideal time if you are that 30-something or 40-something year old individual who has built a little cash and is tired of whatever rat race you might be into. This is an amazing time to find lucrative businesses that are already spinning off $500 to $1 million discretionary earnings to the owner every year. And you can get into one of those businesses now and get very favorable financing with the SBA, and even perhaps attract a minority interest by other investors. And so that's part of the ecosystem at Acquira. I was recruited by them because of my business advisory and coaching work that I've been doing. And I now lead what we call the integration and leadership division of Acquira. We are coming alongside each of these buyers with a team of experts, coaches, and advisors that can help you execute the transition. You negotiate, you close on the deal, but we are going to be there literally with you at this day of closing on site to walk through the transition with your new team, help you plot a course for future success. Our engagement window is 4 to 6 months, all triggered by the closing event. And I've got teams of lead integrators, finance integrators, people and culture integrators, and even sales integrators that come alongside and help you make the transition very successful.
I love this. This is fantastic. You turned me on to it recently, and I've been investigating it. I think it's a really disruptive business model. And again, if the listeners want to find out about Acquira, it's ACQUIRA.com.
Correct.
And it's very exciting, very exciting. And thank you for sharing your story with me today. It was compelling. You've experienced a lot in your career, but you're teaching a lot of us how to do things right. And we really appreciate you contributing and giving us everything that you have so that we can learn how to do things better. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Wayne, for having me on again, and happy to visit with anybody. I offer free consultations on anything and everything we've talked about here. If you're curious and want to know more, just hop over to my website at dougthorp.com. You can get that link for that free consult.
Awesome. Thanks again for being a guest on Blueprint for Wealth. And join us next time for another special guest on Blueprint for Wealth. Have a great week.